Like all living beings, man needs, first and foremost, the appeasement of hunger and the gratification of sexual needs.
Liquor theory without a spin the cord. Liquor theory without a spin the cord.
Hello everyone, welcome to Flickr Theory Reviews. I'm your host, Tadas Vinokur. Today I'm going to talk about Wilhelm Reich and his book, Function of the Orgasm. Wilhelm Reich is an extravagant, fascinating persona that has been discredited in all kinds of ways. Many remember him as a hocus-pocus pseudoscience guy who coined the concept of orgone, or the universal life force, who assembled large boxes called argon energy accumulators and asked people to sit and brew there until the esoteric energy of the universe would rejuvenate their aura, perhaps. One can read about one of these accumulators in Jack Kerouac's On the Road. Wilhelm Reich is also responsible for the invention called the Cloudbuster, which basically is a pseudoscientific contraption, kind of a cannon that could supposedly harness the argon energy of the universe and thereby produce rain. He also, in his later years, began talking about the UFOs and the fact that the planet is most likely under attack by these extraterrestrials. Today, I'm not going to talk about any of this shady business. However, I am interested in the distinct, original voice of Wilhelm Reich within the psychoanalytic community. The same original voice which, together with that of Marcuse's, influenced the movements of the student movements of 1968, which was basically a worldwide escalation of social conflicts, predominantly characterized by rebellions against military and bureaucratic elites. This link to the social movements of the 60s has to do with the fact that Reich's Function of the Orgasm was as widely read in progressive circles as Trotsky's Art and Revolution. In creating morality out of pleasure, Reich allowed the new radicals to view their promiscuity as a form of political activism. I am also interested in this book because of the affinity that it has with Deleuze and Guattari's concept of schizoanalysis, a concept that was in a kind of a screwball and masterful way delineated in D&G's book called Anti-Oedipus. Both of these books, Anti-Oedipus and Function of the Orgasm, treat sexuality as the center that structures the life of society and the inner intellectual behavior. Because I want to focus on Wilhelm Reich's book, I'm only mentioning Anti-Oedipus in passing. But to those who are interested in D&G's groundbreaking work, I would suggest to keep their work in mind throughout this video. One of the reasons being that both of these books do try to combine Marxist and Freudian theory in interesting ways. So, Wilhelm Reich was a student of Freud. After the First World War, in which he participated by joining the Austro-Hungarian army, he moved to Vienna, where he lived right down the street from Freud. After Reich was introduced to psychoanalysis, he fixated on Freud's notion of libido, or the energy of sexuality and life drive. In Freud's own words, libido is the energy that has to do with all that may be comprised under the word love. Well, for Reich, this energy, or libido, seemed to be a significant achievement of Freudian psychoanalysis, and therefore he began his psychoanalytic investigations by analyzing the functioning of the libido in society. Well, why did Freud abandon the libido theory then? Well, Reich says that one after the other, new students of psychoanalysis discarded and watered down the libido theory. Freud was well aware of the difficulties involved in championing libido theory, but in the interest of self-preservation and the consolidation of the movement, he could not permit himself to say what, in a more honest world, he would certainly have stood for all alone. In other words, Reich says that Freud was a pragmatist, Perhaps he thought that the idea that there is this psychosexual energy that is innate to the child and that becomes the main source of the instinct was too radical. Maybe this idea was too radical for Freud. In Wilhelm Reich's view, the most solidly formed part of the Freudian theory is the theory of libido, the theory of dynamics of sexual drives. He says that there are two irreducible drives: sexual preservation and sexual drives. All other drives are secondary formations. For example, will to power, ambition, and death drive. Those are all secondary formations. Antisocial behaviors such as covert or overt aggression spring from secondary drives which owe their existence to the suppression of natural sexuality. In other words, sexual preservation and sexual drives are suppressed. Therefore, people engage in aggressive social behavior. The individual brought up in an atmosphere that negates life and sex acquires a pleasure anxiety, fear of pleasurable excitation, which is represented physiologically in chronic muscular spasms. Again, in this book, Reich claims that the principle of libido energy and its satisfactory development from infancy to adulthood with the adequate satisfaction of libidinal urges make up the most crucial factor in human development. This ties perfectly together with Reich's approach to libido in general. He tries to connect libido, or the sexual drive, with the bodily somatic functioning, which is a little bit different from the way psychoanalysis usually used to approach libido. Libido was treated as a force that stands somewhere in between of psychic processes and bodily processes. Sexuality, according to Reich, is the defining force that allows for healthy physical functioning. Well, if we don't respect this healthy sexual force, Reich believes that certain illnesses may follow. Delay in sexual fulfillment or repression of sexual desires may in fact cause disabilities. To quote Reich, "Like all living beings, man needs, first and foremost, the appeasement of hunger and the gratification of sexual needs. Today's society makes the first difficult and frustrates the other. There is a glaring contradiction between natural demands and certain social institutions, meaning that at every step of our life, our sexual gratification has to be negotiated with the environment, and it will most likely be frustrated. For example, when we focus on our work, duties and tasks and try to forget about our sexuality, we are, in Reich's opinion, wasting our energy. If we don't fight sexuality, we may just have more energy for intellectual work, for example. Most important point made in this book is that sexuality is not a threat to cultural growth. To the contrary, healthy relationship with sexuality might have just alleviated some issues that were present in the 1940s, such as immense violence, wars, and torture, according to Reich. Reich also thinks that wars, various atrocities, and cruel behaviors could be avoided if children were to be brought up properly. He uses examples from the Second World War to substantiate this argument. We can avoid, in his opinion, tyrannic powers by beginning to care about our children, by treating them with respect. Wrong approach to child upbringing may just prepare them for authoritarian leadership. One more point that I should also mention is that Reich was also a Marxist analyst. That is where the term sexual liberation comes from, which illustrates Reich's belief that a true political revolution would be possible only once sexual repression was overthrown. In Reich's opinion, that was the part that Bolsheviks overlooked. So, in what way does Marx affect Reich's approach to libido then? Well, to quote Reich himself, Freud's dictum that the sexual drive first appears in connection with the instinct for nourishment should be of great importance in social psychology if a relationship can be established between it and Marx's not dissimilar thesis that in social existence the need for food is also the basis for the sexual functions of the society. Reich believes that it is particularly in the effect of social phenomena on individuals that psychoanalysis has something to teach Marxists. Marxists have concentrated on social conditions as forces that produce ideology, yet they forgot how ideology can produce social conditions. Reich therefore takes Freudian libido theory and treats it as something that can command the social processes. Such a perspective allows Reich to ultimately join libido with Marxism. In ending this segment, I would like to recall what in 1968 students graffited on the walls. Let's remember the slogans of the day. The more I make love, the more I want to make revolution. The more I make revolution, the more I want to make love. I find my orgasms among the paving stones. The prospect of finding pleasure tomorrow will never compensate for today's boredom. And lastly, the slogan that adorned the walls of the University of Frankfurt, read Reich and act accordingly. Have a good day.